Welcome to Gear Taste Radio, where we're offering an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And a special guest today, Nick Hayes.
Hey.
All the way from sunny California.
Oh, yeah.
If you're familiar with ITS and our company and things we've done on Ridiculous Dialogue, our other podcast, you'll know Nick. He's been around for a long time, and he was really one of the main people that I consulted with when I was developing ITS back in 2009, too. So we've been friends forever. We were in the Navy together, went through Hell Week together, so I thought it'd be cool to have him on while he's in town and talk about not only something geared towards Gear Tasting Radio, which we talk about a lot of skill sets on here, so I thought using that mindset skill set as a way to kind of discuss that topic and then also kind of work that into talking about Nick's book, Elite, which is coming out on May 29th, which I'm pretty excited about for you. I know you're excited about it too, so I want to kind of allow you to share some principles from that because I think it ties in really well with our episode of Gear Taste Radio.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on, bro.
Yeah, man.
Coming out with a book, big deal. Big doings. There's
mindset just in coming out with a book.
I'll tell you, I think one of the most courageous things I've ever done was write a book.
It's big, man. I haven't gotten to... I've worked on it in theory and outline-wise, but I just haven't been able to tackle it yet. So
I've actually been pushing you on that,
I
too.
know you have.
Everyone who loves you is pushing you to do it. But it's
daunting.
Big. It's daunting.
It is, man.
To put it in perspective, I had this thing written over a year ago. First publisher I talked to picked it up. A lot of that was because of a really powerful referral that I had from the athletic world.
Mm-hmm.
So they picked me up, went through an editing process to where you start with like a developmental editor. So they help you craft the story, like, hey, bring that up earlier, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Their job's pretty much to piss you off.
Right.
And they're good at it. And then a couple line edits and stuff like that. And you guys know from the articles I've written here on ITS is that I'm pretty much a perfect speller at all times, I think.
I drink and I misspell things.
I think my editor tried to quit at one point. And then I submitted it to the Department of Defense, and that took 8 months to come back and get approved. So over a year ago, the book was written. It is a daunting experience.
Yeah, man.
Especially coming from a special operations background. One thing that you hear all the time that's part of our culture is the silent professional. You got to be the silent professional. Mm-hmm. Even like in the SEAL teams, in our ethos, it says, I will not advertise the nature of my work. This is something that's hammered down, and it's something that it's just it's steeped in our culture. And I think for me, getting out, that's why I say it's so courageous, I think, to actually write a book, is synthesizing, hey, where do I need to sacrifice my right to free speech and free expression because I was in the military? Mm-hmm. Is that okay?
Well, that ethos is also, it goes hand in hand with a job you're doing, too, and a contract you signed, whereas when you leave the military, that contract is over. And I know that's stretching it, and many people would disagree with that too, but...
Well, it still depends.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, are you giving up training, tactics, and procedures?
Correct.
Are you putting your friends...
Or are you really just making a living?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or are you helping people? Are you lifting yourself up or lifting other people up?
Well, that's what I was going to say. There seems like a fine line between, like, if something you're sharing could hurt something versus if you could empower people to think differently.
That's exactly it.
And that's kind of, I dealt with that on a very small scale whenever I started ITS because a lot of the skill sets that I advocated and discussed were very much things that I took from the military and learned in the military. So I ran into that a lot too, especially when it came to teaching a civilian how to escape from zip ties, which, that was a huge tipping point for me when I released that, and I caught a ton of crap for that. Just the internet slammed me for that. Because guys that had gotten out of the service weren't talking about that. It wasn't commonplace. But I always fell back to the whole, knowledge is a tool, and like any tool, the power lies in the hands of the user. So, just because a skill set doesn't mean that you're going to break into houses or something like that. So,
well, it's true with mindset as well, right?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
There's a coach that I've worked for in the NBA who's never given me a referral to another coach in the NBA. Why would he?
Yeah.
Right.
Why would he? He's got competitive
Close
advantage
to the best.
with
Right.
Right. Exactly. And so I get it, but at the same time, it's like, man, I don't know. People who are willing to get out there and seek knowledge and better themselves deserve it. They deserve to have it. And it's one of those things. It's like, man, I give as much away as I possibly can. Because if I can elevate other people within their own lives and show them, their capabilities and the fact that they're standing in their own way, and there's no reason. There's no reason.
Well, I feel like we share that too, just as friends, and a common trait between us too. I mean, that's what I've always tried to do too. So it's a different approach to it, and I just feel like because I didn't make it all the way through the program and you did, it's like I felt like I had this disconnect where I was somehow more able to do that than you have probably felt, because you belong to that ethos. You know? So
well, what happened with me, as you know, I mean, we've had so many conversations about this to where, I was holding back
right
for way too long. But part of that is because, I got out of the military and cruised to the Middle East 2 weeks later with the contracting company. So it was like this weird, was I out, was I not out? But then once that injury happened, once I, got that spinal fusion surgery and it was done, from then on, there's really no excuse for me to have been as private about some of the stuff that I've been doing as I have been. I always tried to be the behind the scenes guy. So I'm helping coach, NFL team to a Super Bowl. Yeah. And don't put out a single post on social media.
Right.
That's a mistake. Yeah. I know that now. But that's the way I lived my life. I was the behind the scenes guy. And there's a couple people out there right now that are really leading the charge on how to be an entrepreneur. Gary Vee is one of those guys to where he's like, hey, I'm just going to keep a camera on at all times and let people in. And that's a mentality that I've tried to embrace a little bit more moving forward. And it's challenging for me. I don't mind admitting that. Like, when you're in a position to where you're lying to your neighbors about what you do for a living, and then all of a sudden you have an Instagram account, it's like, it's weird, man.
Yeah.
And I still don't really know how to balance that. I'll put a post out that I really care about, and I'm like, man, this feels good. This one nailed it. And it just kind of goes away, and then there's a picture of me like getting beat on in buds or something, and it goes big. I'm like, all right, I guess that works.
Well, I think a lot of what we were able to take mindset-wise from that training, and granted, I'm talking with a limited knowledge than you have. However, we both made it through Hell Week, which was a huge accomplishment.
Together.
In adversity.
That was cool.
Overcoming adversity, really. And I feel like that's carried over in both our lives, and it's a concept that I've been able to use to do what I've been able to do in life. And it's more or less a tool to help you ignore the haters, because there's no hater bigger than an instructor trying to get you to quit, That's true. And it's like, when you've been through that and you can keep moving when someone is telling you you're pathetic and weak and you don't belong here, and it's that like, oh yeah, bring it on, internet hater, cool. You know, you think you're going to trash me? Yeah, no, I've been trashed before.
Yeah, it doesn't even hurt.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those things like when someone does tell you no, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you can't do it with them.
Right. Exactly.
They're sharing their opinion about it, but like you said, man, Bud's instructors are just yelling at you the whole time, and it turns into noise.
Yeah.
It gets funny.
Really, it does. Yeah.
I mean, that's a callus, and it's one of those, you need calluses in your life. We were talking about a situation the other day where I said, listen, if you want to get strong, you go to the gym. If you want to learn how to play guitar, you need calluses on your fingers, because that's the only way you can withstand the pressure of the strings. And that's what those kind of experiences provide us, is these mental calluses. That really enable us to accomplish some pretty amazing things, even in different contexts.
That's why I feel lucky a lot that I was able to get through what I got through, because I feel like I got a large portion of what team guys come out with, which is that ability to ignore noise and succeed, which you do in that training pipeline. So I feel like that's why a lot of team guys that get out and get into the real world are so successful with businesses, because they use those principles to project themselves forward.
Yeah.
And they can ignore that little voice in their head telling them you're not good enough, quit now, avoid the rush, But
it's interesting to see from the outside too, of like, I always view it like a glass of water that you can fill up before your meter of like, I can't do this is tipping over. But to me, like seeing both of you guys and understanding that you went through that, I think it makes your glass taller or wider or whatever. That way, like you said, when an internet hater comes by, it's easier to shake off because you have that mental callus that's just like the biggest callus you could imagine. And so nothing else measures up to like, well, I've always had it worse.
I will admit, though, I had to build that internet hater callous too. It's like I didn't just go into that thinking, oh, fine, I don't not listen. It did affect me at first.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a decade of that under my belt, so
Sure.
I don't read the comments as much anymore now.
Yeah.
However, every time I do come across one, I'm just like, yeah, okay, sure, guy.
Well, you know, it's a balance between the only way to let it never affect you would be to sacrifice any amount of self-awareness, which is not okay.
Right.
We
Which is
have
not
to
okay.
maintain
Yes.
that. So we're always like testing ourselves and pushing ourselves. So when you get feedback, you take it on board. But when that feedback, once you better identified, okay, no, that's not a source that I need to take with me. This is that negative demon. I don't need to take it with me. You can move on and you can move past that. And it's easy to do that if you've surrounded yourself with people that are going to hold you in check. I think we both agreed this morning that the thing that we value most in other people is transparency.
Yes.
You don't
Over loyalty, which was interesting. We had that discussion, and we never. I don't know if I've really ever put that together until we talked about it this morning. But you know, I've always felt that just having people around you can trust is important. However, when we talked this morning, we really broke it down to it being transparency.
Yeah.
Because you want somebody around you that's going to tell you when your shit stinks, and you want someone around you that's also going to be there to support you too. So it's both that you don't want blind loyalty,
Right.
but you want the transparency there in somebody.
You want the truth.
So, yeah, exactly.
You want the truth, and you want it to come from viewpoints that aren't yours.
Correct.
You know, actually, one thing, I even share this in the book as far as surrounding yourself with the right people, is how to structure relationships in your life in a way that does welcome dissent so that you can become more self-aware. And the way I kind of look at it is you have 3 different circles. You know, you have your inner circle. These are the people that you call them at 3 a.m, they're going to show up with a frying pan in case you're in trouble. You know what I mean? These are the people that you can trust. You need to keep that circle small.
Whose car are we going to take?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Do you need help burying that body? You got it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
But it's got to be small, man. I mean, you look at like the most influential person in the history of our species was probably Jesus, and he had 12 friends.
Yeah.
You know, like if that's what he can handle, I don't know how many like I can handle.
Right.
So that's one way to look at that. But then you have your board of advisors, like this personal board of advisors, and this is that middle circle. This is the people that you're not gonna waste their time by trying to identify a problem in your life. But once you've identified that problem, these are people that you can go to for potential solutions. So I've done that in my life. I realized that I had a really strong mentor in my first platoon chief, Jim, really shook me up and got a hold of me and helped me with the course correction that I needed at the time. And I needed that because I was new. I was fresh off of training, cocky as hell despite getting rolled multiple times for swims. Still somehow cocky, having never done anything.
You're the strongest swimmer I know, Nick.
Thanks, man. Thanks. So that's what I needed moving forward. So when I changed my context and got out of the Navy, I was like, you know what? I need to do the exact same thing. But it needs to be people who are strong where I'm weak. I know where I'm strong now, which is what I needed before. But now it's like, check, moving forward. So what I did was I started reaching out to people, many of whom I met through your muster experience and stuff. Like Tim's one of the guys, you know?
Yep.
But who had different viewpoints than me, had different backgrounds than me. You know, someone from finance, someone from this industry, somebody who's, you know, liberal, someone who's conservative, someone who is international, someone who is, you know, or coast to coast. I looked for as much like diversity on that panel as I could possibly get. And I've done the same thing with my company as well, with my board of advisors, you know?
Yeah.
Really looking for that female perspective as well. Because these are all people that can look back at me, and when I'm going through these things, they're going to see something that I don't.
Yep.
And it's provided me that 360 look on my own life. And since I have that, it makes me so much stronger when it comes to the internet dissent or anything that has less value, because that opinion is coming from a position of really not knowing much about me, what I'm doing, or anything else. So it doesn't compete with the opinions that I've gotten through finding people that will be transparent, people who will disagree with me. And that's how I choose them.
Well, you know, and it's also indicative of, you know, the same time we keep going back to internet comments, but it's that mindset is very much what we're addressing too, which is it's not necessarily a closed mindset, but it's one that comes from no experience in that arena. And it's one that is there purely to boost themselves up by making you look bad. You know, so there's something in their own lives that they're not comfortable with, and they're using that as a way to tear you down to try to build themselves up. You know, and that same kind of person is around in the physical world too. You just have to identify that a little closer, and it's harder to find because, just like the internet, those people aren't going to say those same things to you in person.
Right.
So those people are still around in your real life, outside of the internet, but it's tougher to identify them, and what they're doing. A lot of that is, seeing into manipulative techniques that they're trying on you. Some of them could be friends already of yours that you haven't identified yet. So that's an interesting thing that I've always tried to look at too, is trying to identify that personality trait in the real world. So
I think it's really easy to be negative.
yeah.
I think that's a lot of people. Some people just have it as their like go-to reaction. Like they don't, especially when it's something new or something different. It's really easy to be like, I don't like that.
Well, it's also extremely comfortable for people that I guess that aren't really confident in themselves to tear somebody down.
Sure.
Because it's just the go-to. It's like, for me, I'm a very positive person around my friends, so
Right.
I want to see my friends succeed.
Exactly.
Like if somebody's doing something that's making themselves better, why would you not support that? And that's one of the things that I was just mentioning that I find in other people. If I detect like a jealousy kind of vibe in me telling them I've done something good, there's probably something there that's a little bit of a red flag that I haven't seen before. So
Yeah. And, if you identify it that way, then your first emotion towards that dissent is going to be compassion.
correct.
Because when you see that that's coming from a position of pain, it makes your heart goes out to them instead of responding with anger, which I think is really important. One thing to remember is that like negativity is a virus.
Sure.
And it spreads.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Like even
Yep.
I'll give a motivational talk and everyone's feeling great, bada bing, bada boom, but that motivation is like a vapor in the wind, here one moment and gone the next. They're motivated as hell. They get into the car, start driving home, and somebody cuts them off. They're banging on the steering wheel and shouting and everything else.
And it's gone.
And it's gone.
And it carries with them through the rest of the day until they go to sleep.
Yeah,
It's
then
so
they're-
much
then they're-
easier to pick up.
Yeah.
Then they're cashing out at the grocery store, and they treat the woman who's taking
Right.
the money like garbage because
Yep.
they just got cut off. Then she
Yep.
goes home, and they tell
Yeah,
two
it
friends.
really is a
and
virus,
on.
man.
It's a virus. And that's one thing that we have to do. Another one of these elite principles is you have to guard your mind. The second you start looking at your brain as a hard drive, it becomes a lot easier to identify a potential virus.
Sure.
And you got to firewall that.
That's a great analogy, man. I love that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to do it in my own life, right? It's like, how do I guard my mind? There's some stuff on TV. There's some hate and dissent out there that I'm not going to let in my life. There's a lot of money in making me pissed off. I get that. There's a lot of money going into that on these other sources and stuff. So I got to limit that time. I got to back away from it. Like we're talking about some of the internet stuff. Identify what a bully looks like.
Right.
Know that that's what a bully is. I was good at identifying bullies growing up because I moved every couple of years and I was little. So there was always that period where I had to break in. I played athletics. That certainly helped. I became funny, but that was a defense mechanism that was developed by potential bullies, right? So I'm really good at identifying that. Now I'm getting really good at eliminating that from my life.
I've been trying to do that too, just in terms of, you talk about carrying those emotions home with you. One thing that really always stuck with me is I wouldn't necessarily drive aggressively in traffic, but it was always like an inconvenience to me. Like what people did in the vehicles was always, I found some way of seeing that as an inconvenience to me. So it's like as soon as I allowed myself to see that a lot differently, my driving slowed down. I started to not give a shit. Someone would cut me off and be like, man, there must be hurting today. There must be something going on in their life. So it's like I was able to identify that more in people. Just like you're saying, you immediately start leaning towards compassion rather than hate or anger on your end.
What's a muscle that needs to be developed
Yeah.
too? That's the thing about practice is we're actually developing neural pathways in our brain at all times.
Yeah.
Like developing muscle memory. I mean, you could talk about like when I made the transition from the SIG 226 to the Glock. There were a lot of things that changed in that moment. I still had a tight group, but it was always low and left, man. I had to adjust my grip now, and I'm not drawn from my plates anymore. Now I'm from the concealed. Whoa.
Yeah, right.
My primary goes down. I'm going to reach for something that doesn't exist, right? So I had to completely retrain my brain on where I'm going and what I'm doing. It can be done. It just takes time and repetitions. So what you're talking about as identifying someone else's negativity as a hot spot for pain in their own life and the reacting with compassion instead of anger, this is something that must be done consciously. It's something that you must practice. But over time, it becomes your default reaction. You're developing those neural pathways that create muscle memory. So that's your first response.
Yeah, I'm certainly not 100% on that, but
Never will be.
Yeah, I've seen myself grow more towards into that over the last 6 months because I've really been trying to focus on that. So,
well, you know me, I used to be a little bit of a violent person for a little while.
no,
And I had to be really proactive as far as like I cut metal out of my life. I love metal music. I cut that out of my life for a while. Started doing breathing techniques for real.
Yeah,
Doing
and that's
some
something I want to
meditation.
get into. Like, I really want to get into that. My dad's really big on meditation. I've always kind of like laughed it off as something that is not really what I want to do. But the more that I look into it, like I've got some stuff bookmarked on the Wim Hof breathing method and stuff like that too. So I'm gonna get there. I'm not there yet, but that's something I'm shooting towards.
I don't mind giving a free plug to my buddies too. This guy John McGraw, former free safety in the NFL for 10 years. He knows what he's talking about. Love this guy. He's got a company, Vision Pursue, and it's an app that has like daily routines.
That's cool.
It actually walks you through like, hey, think about this, and then there's a guided breathing technique or like walking meditation, which is more my speed. I'm not really the Om kind of dude.
Right.
Nothing against it. It's just for me, I like getting out in nature. I'm going to get a lot more with the vitamin D. But, you know, he'll talk you through like, hey, look at the petals on that tree and notice. And it just brings you back into this very present state, living presently. Because I struggle with that.
Yep.
I'm always thinking about the next thing. I'm a creator.
Yep.
You know, I'm always thinking about what I need to create. My brain's always somewhere else. So I have to practice being present so that I don't miss my kids growing up.
Yeah.
They grow up so fast. I'm like, dude, I got to remember every second of this, you know?
And something that's been huge for me is something Rob and I have talked about multiple times, but it's cutting out extraneous inputs in our life, you know? So, like, I get the paper now, and that's where I get my news. Like, I got to get news, and I'm not going to default to my phone, which I got to read all the other, you know, billions of
Ads.
crap articles about this celebrity or that celebrity. Oh, my God, did you hear what happened to him? So that's the negativity that I don't want in my life, because once I start thinking about that stuff, you know, it transitions into my daily life too. So
Yeah.
that's been a benefit of cutting that out and just focusing on, like, I get the Wall Street Journal because there is no fluff. You know,
You can choose your input.
Yeah, right.
To me, it's like you had a soda machine and like you're choosing what you're putting into the cup. And so many of
Right.
these people are just hammering stuff that's
Right.
terrible for them, when it's like you have choices to subscribe to something that is less about crap than before.
Well,
And
like
so, yeah.
even Apple News, which bills itself as like the next big thing in news, there are so many junk articles, man,
Yeah.
to get to the meat of what you really care about. And I just care about
It
keeping...
forces the source on
yeah,
you too.
right,
Sure.
exactly.
No matter what you try, it's going
Exactly.
to send you whatever
Yes,
they're pushing.
Exactly.
Well, and something I've noticed is that because I meditate and I think the hardest thing to me was the frequency. It was building the habit just to do it. It's, to me nowadays, it's not even about doing it. It's not that 5 minutes I take. I try to do it morning and evening, but it's getting that, like, let's fit it in. And that's the hardest part for me, is not actually doing it. Once you're doing it, you're like, okay, this is just a thing. And yeah, walking, like you said, helps to do something physical while you're doing it, but just getting yourself to do it was, to me, the thing I had to overcome. Less about like that I'm doing it.
Well, Nick and I were talking about that too a little bit yesterday, and you know, I was saying with, you know, I recently had some stuff happen with my mom, and she's not with us anymore, and that really threw me off of my routine that I had. So, you know, everything that I had been doing in the morning and getting up and working out and stuff like that, it was like I couldn't do it for about. I'm just now kind of starting to get back into it. Like I've been walking every morning with the dog, and we've always done that. However, I've just made sure even when the weather's bad, I do it at night if I can't do it in the morning. So it's like I've made myself do that every day. But it just completely threw me off of my routine, and all across the board. It wasn't just the working out part. It was, you know, I stopped doing these certain things because I would try to clean up little things in the morning so by the end of the week I had more of the house clean and stuff. You know, it's like things like that I wasn't doing. So it's crazy how much just getting off of that routine matters when it comes to that. So.
And it's crazy how small of changes affect your
it really
overall
does.
outcome. I mean, it's like we've talked about it before about like waking up at the same time every day. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you don't have to be the early bird, but like just building in the fact that you do the same thing every day. Yeah, it looks monotonous from the outside, but it helps, I think, ground you so much of like you said, when you fall off even a little bit, it can be so jarring, and just pulling yourself back in the little things.
Do you deal with routine in the book?
Yeah, I talked. There's a lot of structure.
Right.
One thing that I wanted to provide is, if someone hasn't had the luxury of going through boot camp or going through a program that's going to help teach you structure, teach you the value of routine, teach you, what it's like to do something right the first time, this is kind of a supplement for that. So here are some tips and tricks that you can put into your life immediately. But I do want to talk about the waking up early thing, because that's really big right now, waking up at like 3:30 in the morning or something.
Oh, yeah.
The way I look at that is, like you said, it's if you do something the same way every single time, if I'm living in New York and I'm waking up at 3:30 every morning, and then I move to LA and now it says 6:30 on the clock, it's the same routine. It's the same exact thing. It's just some people like living in one time zone as if they're in another. That's what I see.
It's an interesting way to look at it.
It's an interesting way to look at it. Like for me, I value my evening time.
Right.
I'm not
Same
an
here.
up before the enemy kind of guy. Plus, when I was in the military, it was always staying up later than the enemy that mattered.
Right.
So I never really understood it. Like for me, I'm all about waking up at a decent hour. My mornings are for family. And I work a little bit later as a result, but like I'm a creator. So I'm going to go with what works for me as far as creating. And then my evening times, once the kids are in bed, that time that I have with my wife, that's my favorite time of the day. No one's taking that from me.
Right.
Nobody. Like, I don't care. You can say, hey, you got to wake up earlier and this and that and things will be better. I'm like, no. No. I'm going to hang out with my girl. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So I think it really is about, one, knowing that you're different than other people. You're an individual. Certain things are going to work for you, so test it. Do A/B testing. Try it this way for a week. Try it that way for a week. Figure out what's right for you, but then absolutely stick with it. If you eat at the same times every day, you're going to get better results. Your body's going to know how to handle it. If you sleep, wake up at the same time every day, you're going to be right as the mill as soon as you pop out of bed, right? And then certain things that jack that up, like drinking alcohol. That one day you drink, the next day your entire routine's out of whack, and it takes 3 days to recover. That's just the way it is. We experienced that at a birthday party here recently. I'm still kind of hurting.
But to me, it's like slipping back into that routine is so comforting because it's there if you've built it. Like, I think it's something I look forward to going back to it. So even when I'm doing oh my gosh, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to sleep, I know I've screwed it up, but it's comforting to me to know that like it's there when I'm ready to go back to it. We do a lot of that with the productivity system we've talked about with getting things done. One of the reasons I think it's such a successful system is you can always kind of like do the Amish Rumspringa thing and just go do whatever you want, and you can always come back to it. It's like, well, I know there's a stake in the ground I can come back to versus like, I have no idea what I'm going to do.
That's a great point. Yeah, because you can't, I travel for a living. I can't maintain what I like to do all the time. It can't really be done. Sometimes my workouts have to come at different times of the day, even though I have my preference.
Sure.
What's important is that it still gets done. And like you said, once you snap back, you're good to go. And there's probably some value in that too. I mean, if you look at even our development as a species, there's something in the masculine male that functions like a rubber band, because we have this thing that was probably about, thousands of years of working together in a tribe, to where when we're at home, when we're in the nest, we want to be on the hunt. Everything is about getting on that hunt. We can't wait to be on the hunt. But as soon as, like a rubber band, as soon as that stretches to the hunt, now all of a sudden you just want to be back to the tribe. You want to be back to the family.
Right.
And it's not that the grass is greener, it's that we're proactive in our DNA. And as soon as we're on the hunt, hey, what's the purpose of the hunt? Get it back to the tribe. Keep the tribe good to go. As soon as you're back with the tribe, hey, I need to enjoy this, even though I know I want to get back on that hunt. Because what matters, more food for the tribe.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I like that.
I see a lot of military guys, especially when they get out, they'll post something. It's like when they're in and you're carrying that 100-pound pack, you're like, this sucks. I hate this. This is awful. And then 6 years later, you're like, God, I miss that. I miss it so much.
We just talked about that this morning. How miserable you are during all that stuff, but what you remember and the experiences you take away from that are the good times.
Right.
So it's like in retrospect, you forget about the things that were weighing you down or hurt you or whatever, and you really just remember the good experiences with people.
And that's such a good example of like what we talked about with positivity is like your own brain doesn't hold on to negativity
That's
for
true.
you, because
That's
you
very
look back
true.
10
Yeah.
years from now, you're like, man, those were good times.
Yeah.
Everybody now is like, man, I miss the late 90s. They were so great.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there was a ton of bad stuff. You just don't remember it.
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying is true, but sometimes our brain does remember
True.
the negative stuff. Like in these situations, that analogy works. But one thing that is important to remember is there's kind of two selves, right? You have your experiencing yourself and your remembering self. They're not the same entity.
No, great
Your
point.
experiencing self is constantly reading and reacting, taking on new information, moving forward with what you got. Your remembering self is referencing. It's all survival based, right?
Yep.
Is referencing for survival. So sometimes that means, like when we're talking about Hell Week, we forget how cold the water was. We forget how bad the chafing was and how bad it burned when you got into the salt water. But I'm thinking about it right now.
Thanks for reminding me. I forgot about it. Yeah.
So we forget that, but we remember how funny it was when so-and-so was hallucinating on Around the World.
Guilty.
Yeah, me too. I literally thought one of the buildings was like a teddy bear.
Oh, God.
Tried to convince the rest of the Smurf crew that there was a teddy bear out there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hilarious. That's going to be a story that we'll tell for, decades.
I
But
almost
the pain
I almost
tends to
hit
go.
I almost hit Bates, who was swimming up, dropping some cheeseburgers in the boat, in the face with a paddle because I thought he was coming to attack the boat. I was like, "What the fuck?"
He threw me a can of Copenhagen.
Yeah, I just had some hamburgers.
He threw me a can of Copenhagen. He's like, Nick. And I reached for it and it dropped in the water. No. And I just watched it like slowly fade away. It was like so close.
Like
it was
Jack
one of my
from
low
Titanic.
points. Yeah.
No.
Wilson. So, that's our remembering selves being strong there. But, one of the things that can completely incapacitate a human being is when that remembering self starts crafting a story around something that paralyzes you.
Yeah.
You see that all the time. There's people who are afraid to drive because of an accident that they got into. Their experiencing self is more than capable, but their remembering self has crafted a story around an event that actually happened. One thing that we have to do is take into account that remembering self can be shaped. Sometimes that's a story that you can kind of get rid of. Keep telling yourself. That's where self-talk comes in.
Yep.
Like, hey, no, that's not the whole story.
Right.
Start to craft a story that's going to
true.
work for you.
That's true.
Definitely.
It's not, hey, I suck at that.
Yeah.
It's no, I learned a lot of valuable lessons there.
Sure.
There's a couple things that worked. I wonder if they would work there.
Right.
But again, it's a proactive approach to make sure that you're eliminating the negativity and really embracing the positive aspect. Because let's face it, dude. Any time you fail, anytime you fall short, anytime something doesn't go your way, take notes.
Yeah.
You just learned a lot, and that
Right.
information is so valuable. And the next time you're going to crush.
Yep.
That's the story.
Yep. I agree, man. Thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have any questions, use the # Gear Tasting on any social media network, and we will find them and get them answered for you. And remember, Nick's book is coming out on May 29th, and where can they go get a hold of that?
Yeah, so my book is called Elite High Performance Lessons and Habits from a Former Navy SEAL. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, audiobook, pretty much anywhere that you can get a book. It's also on my website, which is eliteteams.com, where you can find out about my motivational speaking and some of the offsite workshops and stuff. And then, of course, follow me on Instagram at Nick Hayes Life.
Awesome, man. Thanks, and thanks for listening.